Today, I'm going to have a go at putting together Hoocho's rain gutter grow system to see just how difficult it really is. Let's jump into it. All right, let me take you through all the components and all the tools I'm going to use to put it together. Component-wise, I've got the Hoocho buckets, which I bought from Hydroland directly from Hoocho. I've only got 5 left because I've already built some of these systems. I've then got the net cups, which fit into these buckets. I'll show you that a little bit later. I've got a float valve. I've obviously got the end caps for the gutter system, as well as the little shade for that float valve. I've also got a little 13mm nipple here, which will go onto the float valve and connect into the hydroponic system. Tool-wise, obviously a little wrench for tightening up that float valve, as well as the nipple. I've got some Teflon just to keep the float valve from dripping. To secure the PVC, I'm just using some PVC cement for non-pressurized systems. I've got a miter board so I can cut the PVC rain gutter because I've only got 5 pots left. I'll just use a half a length. A drill, some tin snips to cut out for this. I've got a pen to do the markings, and of course the hole punch for the drill here. Now that's probably one of the most important bits, is to get the hole sizing right to fit that net cup. Now, what size is this? I hear you ask in the comment section below. It is a 2-inch 51mm hole saw, which fits perfectly with the Hydroland net cups, which fit perfectly in the bottom of this. And I will show you a close-up of that a little bit later on. And of course, the main event of this system is the rain gutter itself. So this is downpipe off a building. Well, not off a building, for a building, for a new house. And that's the beauty of this system that Hoocho's designed, is you can sort of pick up these pieces from your local hardware store. And most of these tools you probably have laying around. So should we jump into the build? Thanks to the cameraman for some beautiful filming work today. The cameraman is me. I'm the cameraman as well as everything else. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, sorry about this dirt, this has been sitting for a while. Check the end of my downpipe, just to make sure that there's no little dints like this one here. The reason is that these are quite narrow, these end pieces. So if there's any chips like that, they're just going to end up leaking. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the miter out, cut this nice and flush, and then we'll have a nice square surface that we can attach the end piece to. No power tools needed here. A few little bristles here to clean up, and then that is good to go. Now that I've got my nice square clean edge here, I'm going to measure out where I'm going to put the cover for the float valve. So we'll just rough this in with the end cap. That sits on there nicely. And that's going to be where the float valve sits underneath that. Make sure that's all on. And I'm just going to use my marker pen to go around this. And we're going to cut on the inside. You can see there now. We're going to cut inside this using our tin snips. We want to go quite a way on the inside because I've had some problem, which we'll see later, with algae, I think, because a little bit of light's still getting in. So look, I'm just going to rough it in here. A little bit fiddly. I'm narrowly following that outline, as I said, just because I don't want too much light to get in here, because it does let algae grow. Spoiler, we'll get to that later. And there you go. So now, as you can see, our little float valve cover will sit there, and we can access that float valve. And I haven't taken too much out, so hopefully that sunlight will stay out of there a little bit better this time. Now hang on to this piece. We're going to need it when it comes time to glue. Okay, since we've done that, the next thing we want to work out is our spacing for our buckets. Now, I've only got 5 buckets, so I'm not going to need the whole length of tubing. So I'm just going to get something that's laying around in order to space these out. Here's a handy spacer that I prepared earlier. So what I can do is just rough these up so they're roughly sitting the same space apart. So once I'm happy with my spacing, the beauty of these buckets is they sit pretty much in the middle of this. So I'm happy with the first one, so I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to rough out where I want that center hole to be. Now I'm going to leave that one there. I'm going to double check my spacing with my trusty spacing tool. And then I'm going to work out exactly where I want my second one to go, which is just here. Now you could obviously do whatever spacing you desire. And then I'm going to repeat this process, keeping the buckets lined up. Now when it comes to my end bucket, I'm going to obviously have to cut this off, but I want to leave enough space so the feet and none of the bucket is sitting on the end cap. So I'm going to leave myself plenty of room, and I'll probably cut off somewhere about here. Okay, so that is the system pretty well roughed out. And we can see now where our holes need to go. First though, let's get that miter out and let's cut off the other end here. We won't be needing this bit anymore. Okay, so there's our roughed out rain gutter. Clean up this end as well, and then we're gonna drill some holes. All right, so it's time to drill those holes now for the net cups to sit in. As I said before, I've got my handy drill bit here. This is the 51mm 2 inches in freedom units. All right, now the trick to this is slow and steady. You don't want to crack any of this PVC. You also don't want to punch through the other end. Okay, there we go. Now remember, always measure twice and cut once, because that is where those holes are now. All right, we need to just clean these up a little bit. And there we have it. The next thing we're going to do is seal up the system, but before we do that, we need to just wash out all that plastic, all that dirt, make sure we get a nice solid seal with that PVC glue. Okay, since that's now nice and washed and dry, let's make it a sealed system. So for this part, we obviously need our end caps. We don't need the cover for the float valve, and we need our PVC glue. Now these are something that I think you should probably buy from Hoocho, wherever you are, or buy his 3D printable designs and print them yourself, because I think he's obviously put a lot of work in to design these and come up with this idea where you can just buy this downpipe from the hardware store and create this hydroponic system. I think he 3D prints these himself. They look sort of 3D printed, so we're going to really lather them up with PVC glue just to make sure that they do get a nice, good watertight seal in there. Now for this part as well, I don't want to get this PVC glue on my hands. I made a bit of a mess last time I did this, so I'm just going to wear some disposable gloves this time. Making sure, of course, we put the end cap on the end, which is going to have our float valve, and the other cap on the other end. Now, remember I told you to save the piece we cut out. Hoocho does this in one of his videos, and we're going to use it as sort of a spring-loaded mechanism to keep this, nice and pushed in, because we have cut that hole there. So we're going to sort of fold it up and keep it so it makes a good seal. All right, let's give it a go. Oh, great, I've glued my glue shut. Thanks to myself last time I did this. Can you see that? Only get one chance at doing this. All right, glue in. Lots of glue. Want a good seal in here. Spreading it in. Okay, whoa, it's so strong. All right, here we go. One shot onto the end, and in it goes. Get our end piece fold it up, move that so you can see, push that in. Do you see how I did that? I hope so, because you don't get a second shot with that. That is now as good as sealed. Cool. Now we let that dry and we do the other end. Try not to knock that end around while I'm doing this end. No time for dilly-daddling. Okay. Again, glue. Plenty of glue. Getting it all in those corners. I mean, this is the most important part of the system. And then if there's any little holes from that printing process, this glue will certainly fill them up. Obviously with this glue, that's it. It's a one-use system now. You're not going to be salvaging that and putting it on something else. So you want to get it right the first time. There you go. That is on. Now we just let that dry. Happy days. We'll let that dry for a little while. Then we'll come back. I'll pack some of these tools away and the system is almost there. So while we're waiting for that to dry, let's go check out the ones I've already built and see how they're performing. Well, here we are. Here are the rain gutter grow systems that I've already built. This is 3 of them. There's one more to check out as well. They have come a long way since I started them. These are all grown from seeds. I'm running a coco perlite mix and all these plants are loving it. A few seedlings here to thin out shortly, but otherwise you can see that this system is working really well. One of the key challenges of this system was getting it level. All I had to do though was dig out a bit of dirt and it went down pretty easily after a bit of fiddling. I think Hoocho overcomes this by using some timber slabs, some kind of sleeper timber, and then using some bricks to kind of level it out and putting the pots on top of that. However you want to do it, it's not that big of an issue, but I guess if you had a really steep block or something, yeah, it's just a bit of a fiddly process to get that level. Have to say though, most of the autopot systems also need to be on level ground, so there's not really any kind of competitive disadvantage here, I guess. You're gonna have to have a level field for whatever you're using when it comes to sort of something that uses either gravity or a system like this that is completely passive, like the autopots. Now I mentioned as I was putting it together that I've had a bit of algae grow. Now this one's not too bad because this bit's in the shade most of the time, but some of the ones that are more in the sun, we are getting a little bit of algae growth. Not sure if you can see that, probably see it better now. I mean, I'm not too worried about this at the moment, to be honest. It's just part of hydroponics is you get a bit of algae. If I got worried about it, I'll put like a little bucket or something over the end here, just try and knock out a little bit more of that sun. But yeah, you can see that these plants are growing really well. We do have a bit of an aphid problem, and I'm going to make a video soon about some biological control agents that we're going to use to clean those right up. So make sure you hit like and subscribe if you want to see that. But yeah, as you can see, overall, this system is going really well. And here is the other one. And again, checking out that algae situation. Yeah, not too nice, but you know what? We can clean that up if we need to. It's not a big issue at this stage, but we'll keep an eye on it. Plant-wise, look at this growth. We've got some cucumbers, strawberries grown from seed, which are going into tissue culture, empty pot, and then we've got some flowers growing up the end. If you want to have a look at how this system is working, check out this rhubarb. I pulled this out the other day and you can see that the roots are absolutely going chock-a-blocks down into that gutter, soaking up all that hydroponic nutrients. Well, the beauty of television. While you've been sitting there, this has dried, and before I put in the float valve, I'm going to explain exactly how this works. So we take a bucket and a net cup. The net cup fits exactly inside Hoocho's 3D printed buckets. And now, because of the holes we have drilled, these buckets fit perfectly into our gutter system. We have a little bit of fiddling because the hole is genuinely that perfect, but eventually that will click in and you can see that that bucket is sitting there absolutely perfectly. So, bucket in there, and now you can start seeing the magic. So, the net cup is inside the gutter. And we're gonna fill this gutter with water using that float valve. And then that is gonna wick up through this little net cup, the bit that's in the liquid, and fill the bucket up from the bottom. Now it's gonna do that because of the media we use. We use a coco perlite, or you could use a vermiculite perlite. Any of those kind of hydroponic substrates that use a wicking type motion. You could probably even use a living soil. I don't know, maybe try it out, see how it goes in one of the buckets. But yeah, it's essentially a completely passive wicking system. That's what makes it so great. We love passive systems on this channel. So float valve keeps the water level at the right height. The water level is high enough that it goes into the net cup. The net cup absorbs that moisture. Moisture wicks up, filling the bucket with hydroponic nutrients. Plant, drink hydroponic nutrient, plant happy. Plant grow, plant create fruit. Hopefully that is a simple explainer of how it works. But as you can see, it's a really simple system. So why don't we go and put the rest of those pots in their places. Now the pots from Hoocho come with some feet. So it's a bit of a fiddly process to put these on, but I like using them. So let's take a moment to do that now. Okay, so there we have it. Now, a little feature here, obviously, whoops, just pull those out. Anyway, I'll obviously fiddle with these before I put it out in the garden. Now, feature here on the end, as I said, when we were building it, we wanted to leave enough space there so none of this bucket is overlaying on that end cap, because otherwise these won't sit level. But yeah, there you go, a nice little 5-pot system. So the next thing we need to do is put their net cups in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Attach the float valve. Now, with the float valves, the little rubbery bit goes on the inside. I heard you say it at home. We can pull our spring out now. That's all dried on. Float valve on here. Don't do that up too tight. Don't need to be silly about these things. We'll set that up later when we get closer to it. Where have I put my... We've also got that 13mm nipple, which will go on the end here. A little bit of Teflon around this, because metal to plastic will drip. No problem though. We'll just fit a bit of Teflon. I can never get this stuff to work properly. I feel like the apprentice plumber every time I do this. Anyway, you can all judge me in the comments. I don't care. I'm getting better at it every time I do it. I've read about 5 wraps, trying not to get any dust in that. How many was that? Are you counting? I think that was about 4. We'll do 5. You know what? That will do. That'll do. Teflon on. Bring it up closer so you can see. Float valve in through the hole. Teflon. Little nipple to connect to poly. Just to tighten that a little bit. Shouldn't need too much though. Again, try not to be silly. You don't want this to snap because they're expensive. Well, they're a few dollars, but getting them here is a bit annoying. Cool, that is the extent of the system. So we will set this float valve that will maintain the water level. I hope I've explained it well. Last thing there is the little shade cover. If I can function. And that clips on obviously with his design. So pack up some rubbish and there you have it. Do some reveal editing here, some serious like, yeah, there you go. Obviously got, move that. We've obviously got float valve into our 13mm nipple. That'll connect to our main hydroponic reservoir with all the nutrients, sending it down the line into our pots, which sit perfectly inside the gutter. Bit of depth of field footage there. And we've got 5 pots, all beautifully spaced, ready to grow whatever we want to put in them. Well, now we've got our rain gutter grow system put together, we're going to need 2 more things to make it operational. we're gonna need a substrate to put in the buckets, which the plants are gonna grow in, and we're also gonna need some hydroponic nutrient solution. So let's run through those two components quickly so that you can get on your merry way setting one of these up for yourselves if you want to. When it comes to hydroponic substrates, you're sort of spoiled for choice. You can use simple clay balls, you can use a coco peat brick, you can use perlite, a vermiculite, you can mix the perlite with the vermiculite or mix the perlite with the coco bricks. In fact, you can use a heap of things for substrates, and I'm not going to go through the pros and cons of each of them in this video today. Suffice to say, the substrate that I use is this one from my local hardware store, which is a ready-to-use hydroponic coco peat mix. And what I do with that mix is I take some of the perlite that you can see behind me here, and I mix it in about 50-40, so 40% perlite to 50, that's not right. 40% perlite to 60% coco peat, and what you get is this kind of nice free draining mix, get it in focus, that allows water to drain through, but also retains that moisture retaining properties of the coco peat, which allows the water to wick up through our rain gutter grow system. So let me just show you some of the other options. This is a 50-50 perlite vermiculite mix that I can get from my local hydroponic store. Have a look at, get the camera in focus. Have a look at that. So the vermiculite in this one acts as a wicking agent to suck that moisture up. I find this quite useful in the auto pots. It is incredibly dusty though. Then you have good old perlite. This is really a staple in other hydroponic systems. This comes in a few different sizes. Sometimes you can get sort of a coarse one or a little bit finer. This is quite a large perlite. Again, try and get that to focus. Yeah, and this is the one I mixed through that coco peat to create that blend. Now, for something like these coco bricks, you need to buffer them before you use them, which basically means soaking them in your hydroponic nutrients, which is an incredibly well-planned segue to talking about hydroponic nutrients. Now, I've spoken about hydroponic nutrients on this channel quite a few times, and it's probably the biggest barrier I find for people getting started in hydroponics because it comes across a little bit confusing. But let me break it down for you really simply. Most hydroponic nutrients comes in two parts, a part A and a part B. The part A is generally an NPK fertilizer and the part B is a calcium nitrate. And what you do is mix it up according to the manufacturer's instructions. So this powdered hydroponic nutrients that I got from my local hardware store, I think you do about 1 gram per litre. Hoocho, of course, at Hydroland sells a brand of part A and part B, and you would mix up that according to his instructions. I've also got liquid form hydroponic nutrients. This one, you mix up 5 mils of part A and part B into 1 litre of water. So you've always got to check what you're doing. But I think that's where people get a little bit confused, and it is a bit confusing when you first begin. But essentially what you need is to find a basic hydroponic nutrient that's suitable for whatever plant you're going to grow, and then read the instructions from the manufacturer about how you're going to mix it up into how many litres of water. The next thing you've got to do is check that pH. I have a pH pen, and then you're going to need some pH up and down to get that dialed in to whatever your plants need. pH is really important because that is what allows the plants to uptake that nutrient. So if you run the wrong pH, you're going to find your plants won't be able to access the nutrients that's in the hydroponic solution, and they're not going to grow as well. Once you have all those things dialed in, you're going to have huge success growing hydroponically. If you've got your pH right, you've got your hydroponic nutrients right, you've got your substrates all working well in whatever system they're in. That's why these systems are so popular and why they're used commercially all around the world in all sorts of different growing setups. So that's my crash course in substrates and nutrients. The last thing I want to do is quickly give you a rough idea of how much substrate these little buckets hold. So let's fill up a pot that I know how much volume sits in it and see roughly what this holds. Okay, this is a little 200mm pot. It's around 4.5 liters of media. So let's use that to get an idea of how much Hoocho's buckets will hold. All right, that's about 4.5 liters apparently. And let's see how much fits in here. Almost the same. I filled that up pretty full. If I hadn't filled it as so full, that probably would have all fit in there. But look, this is how much is left. Not a lot, so 4.5 liters. It's around 4.5 liters, a little bit under, depending on how full you've started with this bucket. But yeah, look, a standard basically growing size for a nice hydroponic system. Really happy with how much that holds. And that is how you build Hoocho's rain gutter grow system. Well, thanks for coming along. Hopefully it was interesting. You've probably seen Hoocho build it before, but I'm not Hoocho, and I think I'm gonna title this video a review of the rain gutter grow system. How easy is it to build the rain gutter grow system? I don't know. It'll be something like that. And here's the answer. It's pretty simple. If you've got some tools, you're pretty handy, this is a really easy, simple system to build. It's also pretty cost effective. You need the downpipe, you need the buckets, you can also use the grow spikes. I'll make another video about that. I've got some, haven't done it yet. You need the end caps, this little piece, you need the float valve and the nipple. Bit of Teflon, the glue, etc. But sometimes you have that stuff lying around anyway. And as a system, I've found it really great so far. It's up there with the auto pots in terms of simplicity to use. There is that algae buildup, which I haven't had in the auto pot system. Some people though have commented that they have huge issues with the auto pot systems and algae, which is interesting and news to me. So maybe it's my user error at the moment or something like that. I can also fix it by just putting something on the end to completely black out. Yeah, I haven't had a full crop out of them this year. I've got the cucumbers in them. I've got the flowers in them as well, but it's looking really good. I'm really optimistic about this system. I mean, I could do a cost comparison if you want between the auto pots and this system. I think this system would work out a lot cheaper than the auto pots. In fact, I know it would, just doing the maths in my head now. Yeah, but it's a little bit fiddly at times. But what, I've whipped this together in what will seemingly be probably a 10-minute video. It's probably taken me, in reality, I don't know, an hour or so, just messing about, getting my drill bits and whatever else. But it's not a big task, right? It's nothing you can't do. So would I recommend this? Of course I would. I'd recommend really any hydroponic system. As I've always said, the best hydroponic system you can have is the one that you start with. Once you get into the hobby, you will find it, whoops-a-daisy, hugely addicting. That was my fault, not the error. I also love that Hoocho is an Australian kind of inventor. He's come up with these end cups and he's come up with so many other products, and I think just trying to support him as well is a huge thing for like Australian enthusiasts, because he comes out with some really great products, and his online store is really useful if you need hydroponic supplies. This video, by the way, is not sponsored. He probably doesn't even know I've made it, and he may one day watch it, but I doubt it. Anyway, shout out to him if he did, but yeah, I think this is a great product. It's a great way to get introduced to hydroponics if you're a little bit more handy than just wanting something super simple like the auto pots, which I still maintain are probably the easiest entry-level hydroponic kit on the market at this point. Anyway, that's it for today. Please do think about giving me a like, a subscribe. If there's an option to like super like when you like, I think you can like again, or there's like a super like. I don't know, something showed up in YouTube the other day. That probably boosts me up in the algorithm, helps me out, keeps me making videos like this one. If not, thanks for just watching. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you next time.